The world only notices a company when it's winning. The headlines celebrate growth. Investors celebrate revenue. Social media celebrates success. But what people never see is the moment a billion-dollar company quietly starts falling apart from the inside. Sometimes there's no scandal, no dramatic collapse, no public warning, just silence. A slow shift in customer behavior, a few disappointing sales reports, a feeling inside the office that something is suddenly wrong. And by the time the outside world notices the damage, it's already too late. That's exactly what happened to Ethan Vale. In 2019, Ethan looked untouchable. At only 38 years old, he had built one of the fastest-growing luxury tech companies in the world. Business magazines called him the future of modern branding. Podcasts invited him constantly. Young entrepreneurs copied everything he said. His company, Orion, didn't just sell smartwatches. It sold status. The watches were sleek, minimalistic, expensive, and somehow they became a cultural obsession almost overnight. Celebrities wore them during interviews. Professional athletes showed them off online. Influencers filmed dramatic unboxing videos that generated millions of views. Every product launch felt like an event. People waited in virtual lines for hours just for a chance to buy one. Tech YouTubers described Orion as the perfect fusion between Silicon Valley innovation and luxury fashion. For a while, it seemed true. Revenue exploded year after year. Investors poured money into the company. New offices opened in Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, and Dubai. Inside the headquarters, massive digital screens displayed live sales in real time. Employees celebrated every milestone like they were changing the future. And maybe they believed they were. Ethan certainly did. At conferences, he spoke with absolute confidence. He told audiences that traditional luxury brands were dying. The future, he said, belongs to technology people emotionally connect with. People applauded every word, because at the time he looked completely right. From the outside, Orion looked unstoppable, like the kind of company that would dominate the industry for decades. But inside the headquarters, something terrifying had already begun. At first, nobody noticed it. One disappointing week. Then another, a product launch that sold slightly slower than expected. Executives blamed the economy. Then they blamed competitors. Then marketing algorithms. But the numbers kept getting worse. Sales weren't just slowing down. They were collapsing, violently. Entire warehouses began filling with unsold inventory. Products that once disappeared in minutes now sat untouched for weeks. Customer excitement faded almost overnight. And the strangest part was this. Nobody understood why. The watches were still high quality. The marketing looked beautiful. Celebrities still wore them. The company was spending millions on advertising. So why were customers suddenly losing interest? Late at night, employees started whispering about layoffs. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Financial analysts began asking uncomfortable questions. And for the first time in years, Ethan Vale walked into his office feeling something he had not felt since building the company from nothing. Fear. At first, Ethan refused to believe the company was in real danger. He had seen temporary slowdowns before. Markets changed. Trends shifted. Customers became unpredictable. That was normal. So during the first few weeks, he searched for logical explanations. Maybe the economy was weakening. Luxury products are usually the first things people stop buying when uncertainty appears. That had to be it. But the data didn't support the theory. Other luxury brands were still growing. Some competitors were even reporting record profits. So Ethan moved to the next explanation. Marketing. Maybe Orion's campaigns had become repetitive. Maybe younger audiences were getting bored of the brand's image. The company spent millions testing new advertisements. Different music, different colors, different influencers. Nothing worked. Sales continued falling. Then executives blamed competitors. New smartwatch companies were appearing everywhere. Cheaper products, flashier designs, aggressive online marketing. Maybe customers were simply moving on. But once again, the data didn't make sense. Because customers weren't leaving Orion for another brand. Many of them were simply stopping their purchases entirely. That terrified Ethan. Late at night, long after most employees went home, he started reviewing customer behavior personally. Not summaries, not reports, everything: purchase patterns, customer comments, social media reactions, private feedback, resale data. For weeks, he barely slept, and slowly, a horrifying realization began to form. The problem was not the product. The problem was success itself. The watches had become too popular. A few years earlier, owning an Orion watch meant something. It felt exclusive, rare, sophisticated. People noticed it immediately. But now, everybody had one. College students had them. Office workers had them. Fitness influencers had them. Teenagers showed them off online. The product that once represented exclusivity had become ordinary, and luxury only works when not everyone can have it. That was the moment Ethan finally understood the real problem. Orion had accidentally destroyed its own identity, not because the company failed, because it succeeded too well. The brand stopped feeling aspirational. Customers no longer felt special wearing the watches, and the emotional connection disappeared. Once that happens to a luxury brand, price becomes the only thing customers care about, which is exactly what Ethan feared most. Inside the warehouses, the damage became impossible to ignore. Rows and rows of unopened inventory stretched across massive storage facilities. Millions of dollars frozen in silence, products that once sold out in minutes now collected dust under fluorescent lights. Employees walked through the warehouses whispering to each other. Something felt wrong, dangerously wrong. Investors noticed too. Emergency meetings became constant. Pressure inside the company reached terrifying levels. Some executives wanted aggressive discounts immediately, others wanted cheaper product lines. Several board members pushed for massive advertising campaigns to save momentum, but almost all of them agreed on one thing: the prices had to drop. Customers don't see enough value anymore. We need volume. We need movement. Lower the prices before the situation gets worse. From a business perspective, it sounded logical. But Ethan stayed silent during most of those meetings, because deep down he knew something the others didn't. If Orion became cheap, the brand would die forever. The pressure inside Orion became unbearable. Every morning, new financial reports arrived, and every morning, the numbers looked worse. Sales kept falling, inventory kept growing, investors kept panicking. Inside the headquarters, the atmosphere completely changed. A few months earlier, employees walked through the office laughing, celebrating new launches, talking about expansion. Now people avoided eye contact in elevators. Meetings became tense. Whispers about layoffs spread through the hallways, and at the center of all that pressure was Ethan Vale. The board demanded emergency meetings almost every week, sometimes twice in the same week. Executives filled the conference room carrying spreadsheets, projections, and desperation. Everyone had ideas: massive discounts, flash sales, buy one, get one offers, celebrity partnerships, flood social media with advertising. One executive even suggested creating a cheaper version of the watch for younger customers. "Volume is everything now," he said. "We need products moving before this gets worse." The room agreed immediately, because from a traditional business perspective, their logic made perfect sense. Orion had become too expensive for a product people no longer felt emotionally connected to. So naturally, the solution should be lower prices, more accessibility, more customers, more sales. But Ethan barely spoke during those meetings. Instead, he listened. Quietly, watching everyone panic. Because while the executives focused on revenue, Ethan focused on psychology, and he believed the company was standing on the edge of a permanent disaster. Not financial collapse. Something worse: loss of identity. He understood that the moment a luxury brand starts begging customers to buy, the illusion breaks. Luxury depends on desire, and desire depends on exclusivity. The moment customers see discounts everywhere, the product stops feeling special. It starts feeling desperate, and desperate brands rarely recover. That thought haunted Ethan constantly. Late one night, alone in his office, he stared at a single Orion watch sitting on his desk. A few years earlier, people waited months just for a chance to own one. Now warehouses were overflowing with them. That was the moment he realized something terrifying. The company did not need more customers. It needed more desire, and lowering prices would destroy the last remaining piece of that desire forever. The next emergency board meeting became the most important moment in Orion's history. Executives entered the room expecting Ethan to finally surrender. The financial pressure had become impossible to ignore. Investors were furious. Several major shareholders were already discussing replacing him as CEO. One board member opened the meeting aggressively. "We are running out of time." Another interrupted immediately. "If we don't lower prices now, we could lose everything." More voices joined. "We need movement. We need urgency. We need customers buying again. Sell faster before it's too late." Finally, all eyes turned toward Ethan. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he calmly opened a presentation on the massive screen behind him. The executives expected discount strategies, marketing plans, emergency campaigns. Instead, they saw something that made the entire room freeze. New global pricing strategy, 15%. Nobody spoke. At first, some executives genuinely thought it was a mistake. One board member even laughed nervously. Then Ethan explained, Orion would increase prices across nearly the entire product line immediately. The silence inside the room became almost uncomfortable. Several executives stared at him in disbelief. Others looked genuinely frightened. One investor finally broke the silence. "Have you lost your mind?" Another slammed his hand on the table. "The company is collapsing. And your solution is making the watches more expensive?" To them, it sounded suicidal. The company was already bleeding millions. Customers were already leaving. Social media interest was fading. And Ethan wanted to make the product even harder to buy. Nothing about the strategy made sense. One executive stood up and walked out of the meeting entirely. Another whispered to someone beside him, "He's having a breakdown." But Ethan remained completely calm because while everyone else in the room saw falling sales, he saw something far more dangerous. A luxury brand slowly becoming ordinary, and in Ethan's mind, ordinary was the real death sentence. The announcement went public at 9 a.m. By 9:14, the internet had already turned against Ethan Vale. Financial pages exploded with headlines. Orion raises prices during sales collapse. Luxury tech company losing touch with reality. CEO makes bizarre decision as company struggles. Within hours, social media became brutal. People mocked the company non-stop. TikTok creators laughed at the new prices. Twitter users posted memes comparing Orion watches to overpriced jewelry. Reddit threads predicted the company would disappear within a year. The insults spread everywhere. People called Ethan arrogant, greedy, delusional. Some accused him of trying to manipulate customers. Others claimed he was desperately trying to squeeze money out of a dying company before it collapsed. And honestly, from the outside, it looked exactly like that. Because nothing about the decision seemed rational. The company was already in trouble. Customers were already losing interest, and instead of making the product easier to buy, Ethan made it dramatically more expensive. It felt disconnected from reality. Then the tech YouTubers joined the chaos. Several major creators released videos with titles like The End of Orion, How One CEO Destroyed a Billion-Dollar Brand, The Dumbest Pricing Strategy Ever. Millions of people watched, and almost every single commentator reached the same conclusion: Orion was finished. But the damage didn't stop online. Inside the financial world, the reaction became even worse. Major investors began calling emergency meetings behind closed doors. Some demanded Ethan be removed immediately. Others threatened legal action if the company continued reckless leadership decisions. Financial blogs described the strategy as corporate suicide disguised as confidence. Stock analysts downgraded the company within days. One investment firm publicly stated, Orion no longer understands its customer base. That sentence spread everywhere. And the terrifying part? Even loyal customers started abandoning the brand publicly. People who once proudly posted photos of their watches now mocked the company online alongside everyone else. Some influencers deleted old sponsorship content entirely. Others openly switched to competitor brands during live streams. For the first time in years, wearing an Orion watch no longer felt impressive. It felt embarrassing. Inside the headquarters, morale collapsed. Employees stopped believing in the company's future. Conversations became quieter. The office cafeteria felt almost silent during lunch hours. Some workers secretly printed resumes during breaks. Others took private calls with recruiters in parking garages before work. One senior designer resigned without even waiting for another job offer. People were scared, and fear spreads quickly inside companies, especially when leadership appears unstable. At night, Ethan sometimes walked alone through the darkened office floors after most employees had gone home. Entire sections of the building sat empty in silence. Computer screens glowed faintly in abandoned workspaces, and for brief moments, even he questioned himself. Had he gone too far? Was everyone else right? Because the numbers were becoming horrifying. Sales dropped even harder after the price increase. Not slightly, violently. The company began losing millions faster than before. Investors panicked. Some threatened to pull their money out completely. One board member privately warned Ethan, "If this continues another quarter, they'll force you out." But despite all the chaos, Ethan still wasn't finished, because the price increase was never the real strategy. It was only the beginning. His actual plan was far more dangerous. A few days after the pricing disaster, Ethan shocked the entire company again. Most executives still believed the price increase had been a temporary emotional decision, a desperate gamble, something that would quietly be reversed once the backlash became unbearable. But then Ethan walked into another emergency board meeting carrying a thin black folder. No presentation, no marketing reports, no financial projections, just a single document. And when he opened it, the room immediately realized he was doubling down. Orion would massively reduce production, not by 10%, not by 20%, by more than half. The room exploded instantly. Executives interrupted each other before Ethan could even finish speaking. "You can't be serious. This is financial suicide. We already have collapsing sales. And now you want less inventory?" But Ethan continued calmly. From now on, Orion products would only be sold through limited releases. No permanent stock, no constant availability, no massive inventories sitting online waiting for customers. Each collection would exist for a short period of time, then disappear completely. If customers missed the launch, they would have to wait months for another chance, and some products would never return again. The silence after that announcement felt heavier than anger, because for the first time, people inside the room genuinely believed Ethan might destroy the company. One investor leaned forward slowly and asked, "Do you even understand how much money we're losing right now?" Ethan answered immediately, "Yes." That answer somehow made the room even more uncomfortable, because it meant he knew exactly what he was doing. And that terrified them. The company was already bleeding cash, warehouses were full, investors were furious, public perception was collapsing, and Ethan's solution was to intentionally sell fewer products. Nothing about the strategy looked rational. Traditional business logic said the exact opposite. When sales fall, companies increase accessibility. More inventory, more discounts, more advertising, more urgency. But Ethan was creating scarcity instead, artificial scarcity, and everyone around him thought it was insane. Within hours, internal leaks reached the media. The internet exploded again. This CEO wants to sell less during a crisis. Orion cuts production despite revenue collapse. Luxury tech brand appears completely out of control. Financial commentators mocked the strategy non-stop. One famous analyst said, "This may become one of the greatest self-destructions in modern business history." Employees watched those videos during lunch breaks in silence. Nobody defended the company anymore, not publicly. Inside Orion's headquarters, fear became almost physical. Entire departments began preparing for layoffs before any announcements were made. Managers quietly reduced long-term planning. Recruiters from competitor companies started contacting Orion employees aggressively. People sensed weakness, and in business, weakness attracts predators. Then came the revenue reports, and they were catastrophic. Sales dropped even harder after the production cuts were announced. Retail partners panicked. Some stores cancelled large purchase agreements entirely. several investors demanded emergency intervention. One board member privately contacted lawyers to discuss removing Ethan as CEO. Meanwhile, inside the warehouses, workers began shutting down sections of inventory storage. Entire rows of products would never even reach stores anymore. Millions of dollars remained frozen in unsold stock. And every new report made the company appear closer to collapse. For weeks, Orion looked like it was dying in real time. The media treated the company like a slow-motion disaster. Every article sounded like an obituary. Every analyst predicted failure. Every social media post mocked the strategy. And during those weeks, even Ethan started feeling the pressure breaking through his confidence. Late at night, he sat alone in his office replaying the same terrifying question in his mind. What if everyone else is right? Because the truth was, his strategy depended entirely on human psychology. And psychology is dangerous. You cannot fully control it. Customers would either become obsessed with rarity or completely abandon the brand forever. There was no middle ground anymore. Orion wasn't just taking a financial risk, it was gambling its entire identity. Then something unexpected happened, and it started with a single photograph. At first, nobody inside Orion even noticed it. The image appeared late on a Friday night. A famous actor, Adrian Cross, leaving a private event in Los Angeles. Black suit, security around him, camera flashes everywhere. At first glance, the photo looked completely ordinary, just another celebrity picture posted online. But then people noticed something on his wrist, an Orion Eclipse, one of the new limited edition watches. And not just any version, the rare black titanium model that had disappeared from the website in under 4 minutes during its launch weeks earlier. The internet reacted instantly, because this wasn't a paid advertisement. There was no sponsorship disclosure. No campaign, no promotional partnership. Adrian Cross had bought the watch himself, and according to rumors online, it had taken him weeks to get one. That detail changed everything, because suddenly the watch felt valuable again, not because of the technology, not because of the design. Because people realized something psychologically powerful. You couldn't easily have it anymore. Within hours, the photo spread everywhere. Fashion pages reposted it. Celebrity accounts discussed it. Reddit threads exploded trying to identify the exact model. TikTok creators zoomed into blurry screenshots, analyzing the watch frame by frame. Something strange started happening online. The same people who mocked Orion weeks earlier were suddenly asking where they could buy one. But there was a problem. They couldn't. The watches were gone, sold out, unavailable, and that scarcity triggered something dangerous inside people: desire. Because humans rarely obsess over things that are easy to obtain. We obsess over what feels rare, exclusive, difficult. And Orion suddenly became difficult again. The psychology shifted almost overnight. Before, people saw the watches as overpriced gadgets. Now they saw them as status symbols. Not everybody could own one anymore. And the harder the product became to obtain, the more emotionally valuable it felt. Inside Orion's headquarters, employees began noticing something strange in the sales data. Website traffic exploded. Searches for Orion products increased massively. Social media engagement skyrocketed. Forums filled with discussions about future releases. People started tracking launch rumors like collectors chasing rare art pieces. Then the resale market exploded. One limited edition Orion watch appeared online for double the original price, and someone bought it within hours. Another sold for 3 times retail value. Then another, then another. Suddenly customers weren't just buying watches anymore, they were competing for access. That changed everything. Influencers who mocked the company weeks earlier quietly changed their tone. Some started posting videos titled, "How Orion Became Cool Again." Others called the strategy genius. Tech channels that predicted bankruptcy now analyzed the company with fascination. Because for the first time, people understood what Ethan had been trying to do. He was rebuilding exclusivity, and exclusivity creates obsession. Inside the headquarters, the atmosphere slowly began changing again. Employees who feared layoffs started watching sales numbers obsessively. Executives who once attacked Ethan in meetings suddenly became quieter. Investors stopped demanding emergency calls every day. Because the impossible was starting to happen. People wanted the watches again, not because Orion improved the product, not because prices became cheaper, not because of marketing. People wanted them because they became rare, and rarity is one of the most powerful psychological forces in business, especially in luxury. Ethan understood something most companies never learn. The moment everyone can have something, many people stop wanting it. But the moment access disappears, desire returns. And now, desire was returning faster than anyone imagined. Within days, the internet completely changed its tone. It happened so fast that even Orion's executives struggled to believe it. Just weeks earlier, social media treated the company like a joke. People mocked the prices, mocked Ethan, mocked the entire strategy. Now those same people were desperately trying to buy the watches. Online forums exploded with discussions overnight. Threads about Orion suddenly reached thousands of comments. People analyzed release times, tracked inventory rumors, shared screenshots of failed purchases. Some users even created private groups, dedicated entirely to predicting future drops. The brand that looked dead only weeks earlier had become mysterious again, and mystery creates attention. But the most important change wasn't happening inside the company. It was happening psychologically. Customers no longer saw Orion as a smartwatch. They started seeing it as something much more powerful. Proof that you had money, access, connections, luck. Owning the watch suddenly meant you belonged to a smaller group of people. And humans are obsessed with belonging to exclusive groups, especially online. Then the resale market exploded. At first, one Orion Eclipse sold online for twice its retail price. People were shocked. Then another sold for triple. Then collectors started bidding against each other publicly. Some limited models became almost impossible to find. One reseller reportedly made more money flipping Orion watches in 2 months than he made during an entire year at his corporate job. That story spread everywhere, and stories like that create hype. Suddenly, owning an Orion watch wasn't just about fashion anymore. It became an opportunity, a flex, a symbol. And once a product becomes a symbol, logic stops mattering. That was the moment influencers changed sides completely. The same creators who mocked Ethan online now posted videos with titles like "How to get an Orion before they sell out," "Why everybody suddenly wants this watch again," the psychology behind Orion's comeback. Nobody wanted to be left behind anymore, especially after celebrities and athletes started wearing the watches publicly again. Not because Orion paid them, because rarity itself became attractive. The watches felt elite again, and the more difficult they became to obtain, the more emotionally valuable they felt. Launch days became chaos. Customers waited in virtual lines for hours. Websites crashed from traffic spikes. People refreshed pages obsessively hoping inventory would reappear. Some buyers even paid strangers online just for access codes. The entire experience started feeling less like shopping and more like chasing a luxury event. Inside Orion's headquarters, employees watched the transformation in disbelief. The same dashboards that once showed collapsing engagement now exploded with activity. Search volume skyrocketed. Social media mentions multiplied daily. Even customer service emails changed tone. Weeks earlier, customers complained about prices. Now they begged for availability, and for the first time in months, the company felt alive again. During one late-night meeting, an executive finally asked Ethan the question everyone had been thinking. "How did you know this would happen?" Ethan looked at the sales reports quietly before answering. "Because people don't always buy products." The room stayed silent. Then he continued, "Sometimes they buy status." That sentence changed how the company understood itself forever. Orion was never truly selling technology. Technology can be copied. Features can be copied. Designs can be copied. But status is emotional. And emotional products operate under completely different rules. Ethan understood that the moment the watches became too common, they stopped representing identity. People no longer felt unique wearing them. So he rebuilt the one thing luxury absolutely depends on: scarcity. Not fake marketing scarcity, real emotional scarcity. the feeling that not everyone gets access, and once customers started feeling that, again, obsession returned naturally. Because deep down, people don't just want expensive things, they want things other people cannot easily have. Months later, the impossible happened. Orion became massively profitable again, not stable, not recovering, profitable on a level nobody inside the company expected. Especially not after the disaster everyone predicted. Quarterly reports that once terrified investors now shocked them for a completely different reason. Revenue had exploded, margins became enormous, and somehow the company was making more money than ever before. But this time something felt completely different. Orion was no longer chasing mass-market popularity. The company had transformed into something far more powerful, because now they were selling fewer watches while making far more money. That confused almost everyone outside the company. Traditional business logic says growth comes from scale. More customers, more units, more accessibility. But Ethan had discovered the opposite side of luxury psychology. Sometimes making something harder to obtain increases its emotional value dramatically. And emotional value is where real pricing power exists. Every new Orion launch became an online event, not a product release. An event. Customers prepared days in advance. Forums tracked countdowns obsessively. Influencers speculated about quantities and hidden models. People set alarms in the middle of the night just for a chance to access the website before inventory disappeared. And when the launches finally happened, the watches sold out almost instantly, sometimes in minutes, sometimes in seconds. The company no longer needed massive advertising campaigns. Scarcity itself became marketing, because people constantly talked about things they couldn't easily get. Then the waiting lists started growing. At first, hundreds of people signed up, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Some customers waited months, hoping for access to specific models. Others bought older editions at absurd resale prices simply because they couldn't obtain the newest releases. And strangely, the waiting became part of the experience. Customers didn't just want the product anymore, they wanted the achievement of obtaining it. Owning an Orion watch started feeling less like buying technology and more like entering a private club. People posted photos online showing confirmation emails like trophies. Collectors created exclusive communities around rare models. Some owners refused to sell their watches even when offered ridiculous amounts of money, because the product now represented something emotional. Exclusivity, access, identity. And identity is one of the most profitable things a company can ever sell. Inside the headquarters, even long-time employees struggled to recognize the brand anymore. Months earlier, the company felt desperate. Now the atmosphere felt almost controlled. Intentional. Calm, the panic had disappeared. In its place came something much more dangerous. Confidence investors who once demanded Ethan's removal now praised him publicly. Financial analysts called Orion one of the greatest luxury repositionings in modern business. Schools started discussing the strategy in case studies, even competitors, quietly began copying elements of the release. Limited drops, artificial scarcity, exclusive collections, but most failed because they misunderstood the real lesson. Scarcity alone is not enough. People only obsess over rare things when those things already carry emotional meaning, and Ethan understood how to create that meaning. The brand had completely transformed. Orion was no longer viewed as a popular tech company trying to sell gadgets to everyone. Now it felt elite, untouchable, exclusive, and the most ironic part of the entire story was how it all started. Not with a revolutionary invention, not with a new technology, not with better features. It started with a decision almost everyone called stupid, a decision so irrational that people thought Ethan Vale had destroyed his own company, but in reality, he had rebuilt desire itself years later. After Orion had already become one of the most profitable luxury tech brands in the world, Ethan Vale finally explained what he was thinking during those chaotic months. The interview took place in a quiet studio in New York. No dramatic stage, no flashy audience. Just Ethan sitting under soft lighting, wearing a black jacket and one of the original limited edition Orion Eclipse models. By then, people treated him like a visionary. Business schools studied his strategy. Entrepreneurs quoted him constantly online. But during the interview, Ethan admitted something surprising. At the time, he was terrified because despite how brilliant the strategy looked afterward, he had no guarantee it would work. In fact, there were moments he genuinely believed he might destroy the company forever. The interviewer asked the question everyone wanted answered. Why didn't you lower prices like everyone else wanted? Ethan stayed silent for a few seconds before answering. Then, he said something that completely changed the way people understood the story. Our problem was never lack of customers. The interviewer looked confused because at the time, Orion clearly had a sales crisis. But Ethan continued, our problem was lack of desire. That sentence became famous almost instantly because it revealed the real psychology behind everything. Ethan explained that during Orion's rise, the company became obsessed with growth, more sales, more customers, more expansion. Every quarter, investors demanded bigger numbers, and at first, it worked perfectly. The watches became massively popular, but popularity created an invisible problem. The product stopped feeling special, and once something stops feeling special, people emotionally disconnect from it. Ethan said he noticed the shift long before most executives did. At first, customers proudly posted photos wearing Orion watches. Then, slowly, the emotional excitement disappeared. The watches became normal, expected, ordinary. And ordinary products cannot survive in luxury. Markets forever. That realization changed everything for him. Most companies react to falling sales by chasing volume harder, more discounts, more advertising, more accessibility. But Ethan believed that strategy would permanently destroy the company's identity. So instead of maximizing short-term revenue, he focused on rebuilding obsession. Interest obsession. He wanted customers to feel emotional. Tension again, the feeling that access could disappear. The feeling that owning the product meant something. And rebuilding that psychology required sacrifice, massive sacrifice. The interviewer asked him directly, so you intentionally accepted losing millions? Ethan smiled slightly, then answered, yes, that answer shocked many people watching the interview. Because most CEOs are trained to avoid losses at all costs, quarterly performance controls. Everything executives panic when numbers fall, investors demand immediate correction. But Ethan viewed temporary losses differently. To him, they were not always signs of failure. Sometimes, they were investments in positioning. He understood that if Orion kept chasing easy sales, the brand would slowly become forgettable forever. So instead, he used pain strategically. He allowed revenue to collapse temporarily. He allowed criticism to explode online. He allowed investors to panic because he believed emotional scarcity would eventually become more valuable than short-term cash flow. And that's exactly what happened. During the interview, Ethan explained the core principle behind the entire strategy in one sentence. The moment something becomes too available, people stop dreaming about it. That line spread across business media everywhere because it applied far beyond watches, luxury cars, fashion brands, exclusive clubs, even social media personalities. Scarcity creates emotional gravity, and Ethan weaponized that principle better than almost anyone in modern business. The interviewer eventually asked him one final question. If you could go back, knowing how painful that period was, would you do it again? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, then he looked directly into the camera and added, because companies rarely die from temporary losses. They die when people stop caring. Today, Orion is worth billions of dollars. The company that once looked weeks away from collapse became one of the most powerful luxury technology brands in the world. Its products are now released in carefully controlled quantities. Every launch feels calculated, intentional, exclusive. And despite the massive prices, people still fight for access. Some customers wait months for invitations to private releases. Others spend absurd amounts on resale markets just to own discontinued models. In certain circles, wearing an Orion watch says more about your status than wearing traditional luxury brands that existed for decades. And the most fascinating part, almost none of it happened because of technology. The watches are high quality. Yes, but competitors eventually matched many of the features. Some even surpassed them technically. Yet, Orion continued dominating attention because Ethan understood something deeper than product design. He understood human psychology. Today, business schools analyze the company's transformation like a modern case study in behavioral economics and luxury. Branding professors dissect the strategy in classrooms. Students debate whether Ethan was brilliant or dangerously reckless. Some call it genius, others call it manipulation. But nobody denies the results. Entire marketing conferences have been built around Orion's comeback story. Executives study how the company transformed collapsing demand into obsession, and meanwhile, competitors continue trying to copy the strategy. Limited drops exclusive collections, artificial waiting lists, scarcity marketing, but most of them fail completely because they misunderstand the most important part: artificial. Scarcity only works when people emotionally care about the product. First, if customers feel no emotional connection, scarcity feels fake, manipulative, annoying. But when a brand already carries identity and status, scarcity becomes fuel. And Ethan understood exactly how to use that fuel, because in reality, he was never just selling watches. The watches were only the surface. What customers truly bought was something invisible: exclusivity, identity, status, the feeling of belonging to a smaller, elevated group. That feeling is incredibly powerful. People rarely admit it openly, but throughout history, humans have always chased symbols that separate them from others: luxury products, rare memberships, exclusive experiences, not because they are always necessary, because they create emotional meaning. And Orion became emotional again the moment access became limited. Ironically, the company only regained desire after Ethan stopped trying to sell to everyone. That was the paradox almost nobody understood in the beginning. For years, Orion chased mass popularity, more inventory, more customers, more accessibility, and the more available the product became, the less emotionally valuable it felt. But the moment Ethan pulled the brand away from the masses, people suddenly wanted it more than ever. Not because the watches changed, because perception changed. Scarcity transformed the product from something you could buy into something you might not be able to get. And psychologically, those are completely different things. Years later, people still debate whether Ethan Vale took one of the smartest risks in modern business history, or one of the most dangerous, because if customers had rejected the strategy, Orion probably would have collapsed completely. But they didn't. Instead, the pressure, the criticism, the temporary losses, all became part of rebuilding the brand's mystique. And in the end, the decision everyone called stupid became the exact reason the company survived, maybe even the reason it became legendary. And in the end, Ethan Vale's story proves something most companies never understand. The biggest danger for a brand is not always low sales. Sometimes, the real danger is becoming ordinary, because the moment a product loses its exclusivity, it stops creating emotion. And without emotion, people start buying based only on price. And when that happens, the brand enters a war that rarely ends well. Ethan realized this before everyone else. While investors were looking at numbers, he was looking at human behavior. He understood that desire is not created by convenience. Desire is created by perceived value, by rarity, by the feeling that not everyone can have access. And that is exactly why he made a decision that looked completely insane at the time. He accepted losing millions in the short term to rebuild something far more valuable in the long term: obsession. In the end, Orion did not win because it had the most advanced technology. It won because it made people feel something again, and maybe that is the most important lesson in this entire story. The most powerful companies in the world do not just sell products, they sell identity, status, belonging. And emotions will always be more valuable than logic, because in the end, people rarely buy only what they need. They buy what makes them feel different. And that is exactly what transformed a company that was almost bankrupt into a billion-dollar empire once again. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Profit and Peril, because here we explore the most risky, controversial, and unexpected decisions in the business world, and how some of them created billion-dollar fortunes. Stories about profit, danger, power, and the decisions that changed everything. See you in the next video.